Drop shadows add dimension and make products look realistic, but it's not always possible to capture them in the shoot. In this tutorial, we'll show you how to add realistic drop shadows in Photoshop for white background product photos. Step 1. Isolate your product from the background. Open the photo you wish to modify. Once you're in the new file, open your Layers panel by going to Window, Layers. Select the object in your photo. Copy your selection and paste it into a new layer. Doing this will allow you to work with your product image without destroying the original photo. Give your new layer a name that indicates the background has been removed or isolated to avoid confusion with other layers as you create your shadows. Click on the eye icon next to your background layer to make the background invisible. This way, you'll only be able to see your object against a transparent background. Step 2. Create a new background behind your product. In your Layers panel, select your hidden background layer. Go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Solid Color. A dialog box will appear asking you to name the new layer. Let's call it Solid White. Click OK. Now the color picker window will appear on your screen. Move your cursor all the way to the upper left-hand corner of the color field to select white. Or, in the hexadecimal color value at the bottom of the dialog box next to the pound symbol, type FFFFFF. This will give you a pure white color. Click OK. You should have a layer of white covering your entire image. In your Layers panel, grab your new white fill layer and drag it underneath your isolated layer. Step 3. Determine your cast shadow color. Shadows have color, and you can look at form shadows on your object to determine what the color of your cast shadow should be. Find a form shadow within your object and use your eyedropper tool to select the shadow. The selected color will appear as your foreground color at the bottom of your toolbar. Double-click on the new foreground color to bring up the color picker adjustment dialog box. Adjust your selected color to be a bit darker and less saturated by moving the selection down and to the left of the color field. Click OK. Step 4. Create a drop shadow. With your isolated object layer selected, click on the Effects button at the bottom of your Layers panel and select Drop Shadow. The Drop Shadow dialog box will pop up. Create a drop shadow by setting your shadow color to your foreground color. Don't worry about the opacity, distance, spread, and size levels yet. You can adjust all of that later, but you can use the values that I am using here. Once you're satisfied with your drop shadow settings, click OK. Step 5. Create a layer from your drop shadow. Go to Layer, Layer Style, Create Layer to separate your drop shadow from its layer. This will allow you to modify the shadow independent of the object. You may get a warning dialog box popping up when you go to create the layer. If that's the case, just click OK. Step 6. Distort the drop shadow. In your Layers panel, select the newly created drop shadow layer. Go to Edit, Transform, Distort to pull your drop shadow down to the floor. Artistic knowledge comes in handy here. Consider where the form shadows are on your object to determine which direction the cast shadow should fall naturally. And think about the vanishing point of your image to determine just how far you should distort the shadow. Step 7. Create an alpha channel. Our shadow is starting to look realistic, but remember that in real life, shadows become blurrier and lighter the farther they get from the object. Using an alpha channel is an easy way to control the areas of the shadow that need to blur and lighten. To create an alpha channel, go to Window, Channels to open your Channels panel. Click on the panel menu to select New Channel. A new channel dialog box will pop up. You can keep the name as its default, Alpha 1. Under Color Indicates, make sure the selected area's radio button is chosen. Step 8. Create a gradient within your alpha channel. In your Channels panel, select your new Alpha 1 channel just as you would select a layer. Make sure the visibility, the eye icon to the left of the channel name, is toggled on for all channels. Select the Gradient tool from the toolbar. At the bottom of the toolbar, make sure the foreground is set to black and the background is set to white. In the options bar at the top of your application window, make sure the gradient is set to black to white and the gradient type is linear. Once your gradient settings are correct, set your cursor at the farthest point of your shadow or beyond and draw the gradient toward the part of the shadow that's closest to the object. Step 9. Blur selection. Once you've created your gradient in your alpha channel, you'll see a red gradient on top of your image, indicating how the mask within the channel interacts with your image. You can toggle the eye icon next to Alpha 1 to make the red gradient invisible so it's not distracting. Click on the top channel in your Channels panel, which will either be RGB or CMYK, depending on your image's color mode, to select your color channels and deselect your alpha channel. Go to your Layers panel to make sure you still have your drop shadow layer selected. Go to Filter, Blur, Lens Blur. A dialog box will show up giving you significant controls over your blur. Make sure the box next to Preview is checked. Under Depth Map, select Alpha 1 from the Source drop-down menu. Keep the blur focal distance at 0 and check the box next to Invert. Slide the radius to a high number. In this example, it's set to 72. Leave all other values at their defaults. Click OK. Step 10. Create a layer mask. Go to Select, Load Selection. Choose Alpha 1 from the channel drop-down options and make sure the radio button next to New Selection is checked. Click OK. Now you'll see a selection approximating the darkest areas of the gradient you created in your alpha channel. Select Inverse by going to Select, Inverse, or by using the Photoshop keyboard shortcut for the action by typing Shift-Control-I or Shift-Command-I on a Mac. In your Layers panel, click on the layer mask icon at the bottom of the panel. When the mask is applied, the shadow will appear to fade as it recedes into the distance. Notice the thumbnail for the layer mask matches the thumbnail next to Alpha 1. You should see your shadow recede into the background as it gets farther away from the object. If you're looking for a subtler shadow, reduce the opacity of your drop shadow layer. Step 11. Consider the light source and clean up your shadows. Finally, make sure no portions of your shadow appear on the wrong side of your product or object. So in the example in this tutorial, there should be no instances of the shadow that appear in front of the bicycle, since the light source pushes the cast shadow behind it. Using the eraser tool, carefully remove shadows that don't belong. You now have an image with a realistic shadow that you can use to enhance your e-commerce site. Head over to our channel for more Photoshop tutorials, and don't forget to like and subscribe.